My name is PJ Wenger. I am a licensed professional counselor, marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice in Bordentown called Insights Counseling. I am also a trauma responder for the county and a national trauma responder, having responded to events in schools like school shootings, suicides. I've responded to 9/11 events and also Hurricane Sandy. So that is my background.
I'm Ken Kinter. I'm also a licensed professional counselor. I work at Insights as well in Bordentown. And most of my experience is working in addictions and emergency settings. So I do a lot more of the addictions work. PJ works much more often with children and with families and couples. And I tend to work with people who have more, I'll say, more significant or severe mental illness and also addictions.
Wow. So both of you are highly needed in this time that we're in.
Certainly in the area of addictions, because we know that the purchase of alcohol has raised 55% since March 21st, and the purchase of wine has increased 243%. So certainly the addictions is an area that is definitely needed at this time, as well as people just feeling isolated, depressed, and anxious about what's going on.
That's crazy, but that's not shocking either. And sadly enough, we already had a high addiction rate, and we already had a high depression and suicidal rate, and this has just amplified onto it. But one of the reasons that I brought you onto the show, and you came highly recommended by Mercer County, is because as a child, okay, adults, you know ways to figure this out, but as a child, what must be going through your brain? And not every child communicates with their parent. So I thought maybe you guys could give some of our listeners and viewers who have children some best practices or tips or things. What are you hearing? Like, how can you help people maybe communicate? Because this could be a form of PTSD for a child.
So the children are all over the place in terms of, it really depends on their age. So for the younger children, they really don't have a grasp of the situation. They're very young. I tell parents not to have a lot of exposure to the news, like don't have the news running all day for any of the children, even the teenagers, to talk to them about what's happening, but in terms that they can understand. If they need help, there is a great resource on the CDC website, Center for Disease Control, about how to talk to your kids about the coronavirus, and it breaks it down into age groups. For the teenagers, they're in a very different place. They're having a difficult time with social isolation. They want to sneak out of their house. They don't believe it's as bad as, sometimes the news is portraying it to be. I have some students who are rotating petitions to go back to school because they want to see their friends. And again, we have to really be creative with teenagers about how to have social connection. Because you're right, they don't talk to their parents, they are talking to each other. And we want to have those conversations. So what I tell parents is, identify for the teenager especially, which adult will they talk to? Who is the person that they go to have conversations? Because that's the kind of link you want to have to connect with your teenager. They are having a difficult time and they don't think that you understand. But my teenagers are also reporting to me that their parents are having a difficult time. So it's kind of that old adage, when you get on the plane, you have to put on your oxygen mask before you put on your child's. So I'm telling, parents and adults, we really need to have our oxygen masks in place. We need to have ourselves balanced and in a good place before we can expect our teenagers to also have that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. In fact, I love that you brought that up, because as a child, we will, children will not say something because they don't want to make the parent upset. And I love the airplane scenario, because you really do have to put the oxygen mask on first. You get counseling and talk to someone, and then talk to the children.
Bingo.
And it goes in that order.
Yep. 100%.
Not everyone believes in therapy, and I say that lovingly.
I'm a family who did not believe in therapy.
Here you are.
And here I am.
Yeah. And if you tell somebody that you're a therapist, you get one of two reactions. One is you get their life story in the next 5 minutes, or the other one is, oh, you're going to analyze everything I say. So it's kind of an all or nothing thing.
Say they have a frequently asked question that you can answer or a resource to go to, because there's so many different ways you could be here for 2 hours talking about all the scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we encourage everyone to reach out to us. They can reach us either on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on by email. But the other resource, if they don't want to reach out to us specifically and they want more of an anonymous situation, is childmind.org. Has psychologists who are staffing every day, Monday through Friday, from I believe it's 10:30 to 4, where they can ask questions, and it is a little more anonymous. There's also some helplines, and I did give them to you before the show. So I don't know if you're going to post them for people, but there are some helplines that they can call if they just want to talk or if they're feeling distressed. That again is more anonymous. And there are lines for teens as well as for adults.
And we will provide, I took all of your information, everyone, in the Facebook link. There's a PDF that you can download and use as a resource. So thank you for that. Because as much as the internet is super awesome, it's also very confusing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am hearing that from a lot of my educators.
How does someone really stay connected to people despite the social distancing so we can get through this?
So we recommend connection remotely as much as you can. So I know Ken's family just started a weekend Zoom link meeting where they all get on the Zoom and they're all talking to each other and having conversations. There is Google Chats. The kids are using that a lot, and Google Meetup, so that people can all be together. We're now telling people, you can do some drive-bys. So if you drive by somebody's house and you stay in your car and they stay on their porch, you're still 6 to 10 feet away from each other and you can still at least see the person. It's real important to see people right now. So any way you can do that, FaceTime, Zoom, Google Meetups, there's Netflix movies that they can watch together. There's a bunch of different platforms just to stay connected. And of course, I tell people, we have to revert maybe back to snail mail. That seems a little antiquated, but it is really nice right now that people are getting a letter in the mail from a friend with maybe a dried flower in it, or maybe a little trinket of some kind just to make their day, because the mail's still moving. So that's a really nice way also to stay connected.
I love snail mail. I actually got a card from one of my viewers at how awesome they appreciated the show and my efforts. And that just made my day. I would say we only get bills in the mail anymore.
Nice to get something good. Well, we had a funny experience with this. A bunch of my cousins and myself started this Zoom thing on the weekends, and we got my 95-year-old aunt onto the talk. So we kind of introduced her to Zoom, and she's older and she's kind of isolated. And so what that led to is now a card campaign where a bunch of us are all going to write her and reach out to her because, it's difficult enough to be quarantined under any circumstances. I mean, my aunt's 95 years old. She's got some health issues. So any contact with the outside world is a good thing for her. It's a good thing for anybody.
I love it. One other thing that's important is some advice for okay, so we're into like a second phase, I say phase because it's a month.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things, best practices for parents? So because I know I've caught myself being angry, snappy, upset, crying. I'm going through emotions as if there was like a death or something.
It actually is not crazy. It's really a grief process that people are going through. We're grieving things that we have lost, like vacations, like being able to go out with friends. For the teenagers and the kids, proms, plays, dances, graduations. So it is very similar to a grief process. You're not crazy.
We're all doing this to a degree.
Yeah.
We were all losing something. or in anticipation of losing something. That's a scary place to be.
And so what our best recommendation for people is to really have some kind of a schedule. And that when I say that, everybody kind of thinks about like from 9 to 10, I have to do this, or from 10 to 11, I have to do this. But it's not that kind of schedule. It's not that rigid. It is, you just have to have scheduled things like playtime. Like I hear parents who are working from home and doing education from home, they're not teachers, but now they have to assume that role, and they feel like they're just working nonstop. And I tell them, you have to schedule in the playtime, and you have to schedule in the, I'm going in my room and I'm closing the door and I'm locking the door, and don't disturb me for an hour, or I'm going to go take a bath and don't disturb me for an hour. You have to really build in those rest times. I encourage people to get out of their house, even if you're walking around the block, if you're walking down the street. We live pretty remotely in a rural area, so we have a lot of people walking on the streets right now. And normally I would tell people not to walk on our roads, but everybody's being very kind who's in cars and allowing people a wide berth to be able to walk. And just to get out and get fresh air really helps us. We're encouraging people to do body work. And I know my teachers are like, please don't tell me to do yoga anymore. But it's not just, it's just moving your body, getting out, doing something, taking on a new hobby. We have to be really creative in these times to keep ourselves in a positive vein and to really keep things that pique our interest, pique our children's interest. I'm all in favor of the challenges. We've seen a lot of negative challenges in the past with some of our teenagers and children, but I'm really for a positive challenge. So, grow a plant and start putting on Facebook how big your plant is going and what kind of plant you're growing, or take up a new hobby. I have some teenagers who have taken up knitting, and they're watching YouTube videos and they're knitting scarves for the homeless for winter. So again, create a challenge for your social group.
I love that.
Well, I mean, there at any given thing, when we were in our quote normal routine before this happened, there was a long laundry list of things that everybody had, of things I want to do and things I'd love to do and all that. And then we got into this quarantine, and the opportunity of it is that you actually have an opportunity to do some things and take on some things that haven't been done. We were kind of joking, just going through our process. We're like cleaning the house. The dog's never been in better shape in her life because she's walking God knows how many times a day. But we've managed to make room for all those things. So all of those little projects, all those things that have been sitting on the shelf but just never had time to do, now there's time. This is a great opportunity to take on something like that. Because my belief is, when we get out the other side of this, whatever the new normal is going to look like on the other side, I want to have something to show for the time that we were pinned down here during quarantine. Yeah. So this is a great opportunity to take something on and make a positive, change.
Yeah. And Ken and I are dealing with people who have friends and family members who are diagnosed with COVID and are dying because of the virus. And, one of the suggestions I had to them is we have so many pictures on our phone. And, make a collage of that person, of all the good memories that you had, and frame it and hang it up so that you're honoring that person, because we can't do our normal grieving processes and funeral processes that we are familiar with. So we have to create new ones.
Yes, and that is well said, and we have to wrap up. But thank you so much for coming on. And, these are the professionals. And please, everyone, take heed to what they're saying. It's so important in these times to not come out 30 pounds overweight and depressed and hooked on alcohol.
You make a great point in that the other part of this that we haven't gotten to yet is the reentry part of this. What habits do you want to change that you picked up while on quarantine that you want to keep? And then the other part of this is when we start to return back to normal again, is when sometimes the emotional import of things hits. I don't know if you had the experience where you've gone through a crisis, and when you're in the crisis, you do what you need to do. And as soon as the crisis is over, okay, that's when it shows up. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is as this hopefully lifts and we get to go back to what looks like our normal routine, that's when the emotional import of this is really going to hit. And that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah. Going to be a lot of PTSD going on for people.
Yeah.
Awesome people like you guys that are, authentic and really genuine to helping That's why you're doing what you do. So thank you so much for coming onto the show. And we may be bringing you back on to address another phase of it. So if you're open for that, that would be great.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
Be happy to do that.
Yeah.